Hello, this is Spartan Commander, and just to say this is a special video I thought I'd do on the missing 9th Legion. A lot of you may well know about the 9th Legion, Legion IX Hispana, who actually disappeared from Roman records in about AD 108. Now, the Legion, 5,000 men just seem to disappear. And there are three credible reasons for that scholars are hotly debating even today. Now, the one thing that they were thinking about is that the 9th Legion that was in Britannia was redeployed to Germania, okay, to the Rhineland there. But there are no records to support this. This is a theory that's been looked at. I think some people think that they were deployed to the Rhineland. The second thought about what happened to the 9th Legion was that it was sent to Judea, to the Bar Kokhba revolt, if you've ever heard of that, where they were completely annihilated in Judea. Okay, so that's two of the three thoughts on what happened to the 9th Legion. But the third thought, the third reason for their disappearance is thought to be that they actually marched up into Caledonia, modern day Scotland, where they were ambushed by the Scottish tribes up there and completely annihilated, not one survivor. I think that's the one thought that I think I lean to on what happened to the 9th. Now, just to give you a little bit of background about the 9th Legion, it was a battle-hardened legion, and of course it was just called the 9th Legion, but the Hispana part of it was a nickname that the Legion got for their great battle success in Spain. Of course, Hispana was the Roman name for Spain, and that's where they got their that nickname Hispana from. And as I say, they were a battle-hardened legion. I think they arrived in the UK, or Britannia as it was then, the Roman name, in 43 AD. Okay, so they arrived in 43 AD. Now here's something you might not know about. You've obviously all heard of the Boudica rebellion. Okay, well, the 9th Legion was sent to lift a siege of Colchester. Okay, now Colchester was a major Roman city that was under siege by Boudica. Okay, so the 9th Legion was sent there to relieve that siege, but it worked out absolutely disastrously for the 9th Legion, and it is said that most, if not all, of their infantry were killed. Only their cavalry escaped, okay, in that Boudica rebellion, trying to lift the siege of Colchester. Now the Legion was repopulated by from legionnaires from the Germania part of the Roman Empire. So they were all the casualties that they lost, all the men that they lost were replaced by Roman legions from Germania. Okay, so that's a little bit of background there. So they were a battle-hardened legion. As I say, they got their nickname Hispana because of the great battle success they had in Spain, and so they were a tough, outfit there, really. And the last sighting of the 9th Legion was them marching out of York, okay, which is the north of Britannia, and into the wilderness of Caledonia. Okay, so 5,000 men marched up into Caledonia, where they heard that the Caledonian tribes were kind of causing trouble, raiding into Britannia, and it was like a wild country there. So Rome decided to send one of its best battle-hardened legions into Caledonia to kind of quash, if you like, the tribes, the Scottish tribes that were there. So that was the last sighting they were seen, and that was in AD 108. Okay, that's the last time that anybody saw the 9th Legion, in AD 108, moving out of York, as I say, in the north of Britannia, into Caledonia, which is the Roman name for Scotland. And that's where they actually, as I say, that's the last sighting there. Now, what a lot of scholars are saying is that the Celtic tribes, the actual Scottish tribes, let that legion get further and further away from, you know, reinforcements and from Roman authority, and then ambush them somewhere in, you know, if you like, up country, as far away from any kind of Roman authorities there. And the whole 5,000 men were completely annihilated. Now, that was such a disaster that Rome may well not have wanted to actually document that. That's why there's no documentation. Now, straight away you might think, well, Teutoburger Forest was a disaster for the Romans, but we all know about that. Well, the reason for that is because, of course, there were Roman survivors who actually got back, and the authorities knew that it's no good telling them to not talk about it, because the word would get out, wouldn't it? And so there were survivors from the Teutoburger Forest, and so that's why we know about what happened at Teutoburger, okay? But the Ninth Legion, there were no survivors, not one kind of clue or anything on what happened to them. And so it looks like, you know, probably that they were completely annihilated somewhere up in Scotland. Now, you might think to yourself, well, why hasn't anything been found of the Ninth Legion, you know, like armor, swords, you know, or anything at all? And what I was thinking was, I wonder if it was such a massive victory for the Scottish tribes that they collected the armor, the swords, the shields, the eagle, and I wonder whether they may, and this is just my thoughts here, I wonder whether they might have had a sacred cave where they took all the paraphernalia, if you like, from the battle and put into that sacred cave as an offering to their war gods, a thank you to their war gods for giving them victory against these, you know, these invaders. And I wonder whether, you know, the eagle unit, the shields, the armor, the swords, I wonder if they're still in a sacred cave somewhere, a hidden sacred cave somewhere, just waiting to be discovered. Now, there has been archaeological digs, and archaeologists have been searching up in Scotland for any trace of the Ninth, and of course nothing's been found. But wouldn't it be funny, after all those professionals of search for the Ninth Legion, and just a man out walking his dog one day, and the dog takes a different kind of route, and you know, the man follows it down, and there is a hidden cave, and the dog runs into the hidden cave, and the man goes in there, and after his eyes get used to the darkness, he starts seeing things kind of glittering and things, and he goes home, gets a torch, goes back to the cave, and there is all the paraphernalia from the Ninth Legion that the Scottish tribesmen have put into this sacred cave as an offering, as I say, to their war gods for the great victory they've got. And as I say, that's just my thoughts on that, you know, and I just thought, wouldn't that be really surprising that all the professional scholars and archaeologists have been searching Caledonia or Scotland for any trace of the Ninth, and it was just a man out walking his dog found it? That would, to me, that would be, you know, really funny. But like I say, it is possible that it was such a disaster that the Romans just did not want to talk about it, and because there was no survivors, no record was ever made of what happened to the Ninth. Now, it's strange that Emperor Hadrian, I think not long after what happened to the Ninth, came over to the UK and then ordered his wall to be built, Hadrian's Wall to be built. And it is said, it seems to be quite a coincidence that he said about having a wall built there to keep the Caledonian tribes away from Britannia, you know, not that long after the Ninth Legion went missing. Also, there's something here that you might find interesting. In the Roman records, it is said, and I want to try and get this quote right for you. Okay, it is said that under Hadrian's rule, there was a terrible catastrophe in Caledonia. Okay, but no other details. Okay, that is something that scholars have found, that there was a terrible catastrophe in Caledonia under Hadrian's rule. So something obviously terrible happened to a Roman legion in Caledonia. So if you see what I mean, that's why I'm leaning towards that theory. I mean, as I say, other scholars say that they may well have been deployed to Germania, or they may well have been deployed to Judea, where they were supposedly wiped out. That, as I say, that's the other two major considerations that scholars are looking at. But I think the Caledonian one, to me, as I say, the last sighting of the ninth was leaving York, as I say, the north of England, going out into the wilds of Caledonia. Now remember, in those days, Caledonia was like the Wild West, if you like. They knew there were fierce, terrible tribes that were roaming there. And don't forget that those Scottish tribes had a loose coordination. Like, you know, they were a loose group of tribesmen that kind of got together to fight the invading Romans. So, and as I say, what I would guess was that those Scottish tribes would let that Ninth Legion go further and further and further into Scotland, further and further away, as I say, from Roman authority, and then crash into them, ambush them. And then, of course, the further they were away from the Roman authorities, any survivors from the initial clash has then got a long distance to try and get back to Roman authorities, where they could have been hunted down and killed, and that's why there's no survivors. But I just wonder whether any of you, I know that a lot of you that watch our battle videos are really clued up on Roman history and things like that. I just wonder whether you've got a thought on what happened to the Ninth Hispana Legion there. It would be interesting for you to put your thoughts in the comments on that, because I just think it's as I say, I was doing a bit of research on it, and scholars for years and years and years have been really arguing, as I say, about what really happened to them. And isn't it strange that there's no records in the, you know, no Roman records on the Legion there, and that's why it's been thought that, as I say, it was such a disaster, such a catastrophe to Roman troops, you know, in Caledonia and in Britannia in general, that they just didn't want to, and they knew there was no survivors. There didn't seem to be any survivors, so why not just strike the Ninth Legion out of all the records, so that the disaster, the kind of dishonor that they would have felt about Roman troops being taken out by, you know, basically Stone Age tribes, really, I suppose, what the Scottish tribes were like back then. And I think it'd be very interesting. And like I said to you, there's been a lot of archaeological investigation into Caledonia looking for the Ninth, and nobody's ever found anything. And like I said, wouldn't it be ironic kind of thing, if you like, if a man walking his dog found a cave full of the paraphernalia from the Ninth Legion? That would be that certainly would make news, wouldn't it? So as I say, I think it's a really you know, I don't know whether, unless there's any archaeological you know, finds in Caledonia, it can never be proved that, you know, that they were wiped out in Caledonia. And also the theory of that whether they redeployed to Germania, I'm not sure there's any definite, you know, concrete evidence that they were ever there, or going to Judea either. You know, apparently a legion was wiped out in that Judea rebellion, but the legion wasn't said what it was. Did you know the Roman record didn't say which legion it was? So that's why there was speculation, could it have been the Ninth sent to Judea and got wiped out there? But I think looking at all the arguments here, I still think that the Caledonia here, where they were last seen in AD 108, as I say, marching out of York, the north of Britannia, into the wilds of Caledonia there, I think that somewhere up there could well be some evidence of what happened. I mean, if you think about it, 5,000 battle-hardened troops ambushed up by, well, I don't know how many would be in the Scottish tribes up there, but to wipe out a whole legion, I mean, that must be, I mean, is that basically unprecedented? Has there ever been a Roman legions completely wiped out with no survivors? A lot of you might be more up on Roman history than myself, but as I say, the thought of 5,000 veteran battle-hardened troops being completely wiped out, no trace of them, up in the wilds of Scotland, you know, and then I'm guessing that after that happened, the Romans would have been very reluctant to go north again, wouldn't they? If once that legion had disappeared, I mean, I doubt very much whether they'd have even sent scouts or search parties up into Scotland, because they might have been so worried about them being ambushed, and wiped out, as well as a ninth. But as I say, a lot of you, I think, are probably really up on Roman history, and you may well have your own ideas of what happened to the ninth. But for me, I think, looking at the evidence, well, no evidence really, but just thinking about the three main options that scholars talk about, I think probably they were ambushed and wiped out in Caledonia. But as I say, it is a real mystery that nothing has ever been found in regard to the ninth. It's like someone just clicked their fingers and they've disappeared from history. And I always like an intriguing historic mystery, and I'm guessing a lot of you do as well. Anyway, sorry there wasn't a battle for you today. I hope you found this conversation about the ninth quite interesting, and if you would like to put your thoughts forward in the comments, it would be great to hear what you think about what happened to the 9th Hispana Legion that mysteriously disappeared.